But before we get to that, I will start with the first keynote talk, which is not quite a traditional keynote. Instead, it will be more practical workshop style keynote. And as we wrote in the email that went to all of the participants, we are planning to rename the main branch of Aspect. And in this keynote, I want to quickly, first of all, discuss why that is an idea and how we are going to do this. So let me start with a bit of history to give a background to this. The default branch that is created in every Git repository is historically has been called master. This is the default branch that is created. This is usually the branch that is used to create any other feature branches with improvements, and it forms the official version of the project. So for example, all releases are created from this branch. As I mentioned, the historic term for this is master, which is why this name is used in many Git projects. But it's important to understand that intrinsically this name has no meaning to Git. Other version control system software use other names, like trunk in Subversion. Other projects use default or main. Git uses this term because the predecessor it is modeled on, a software that is called BitKeeper, used the term. And most of the time, this term was used as in master record in BitKeeper. But in a lot of the documentation of BitKeeper, there are also references to master and slave repositories, i.e. this term derives from the master-slave relationship between repositories or branches. So why is this a problem? In recent years, actually since a lot of years, people have argued that using the analogy of a master-slave relationship in technical terms for IT is unfortunate, something that shouldn't be done because it can be perceived as offensive for other people, even if no offense was meant by using the term. This is, for example, stated in a draft document that the Internet Engineering Task Force has put out and updated several times since it was first created in 2018. They write, master-slave is an offensive and exclusionary metaphor that will and should never become fully detached from history. In addition to being inappropriate, the master-slave metaphor is both technically and historically inaccurate. For instance, in the domain name system in the internet, the slave is able to refuse zone transfers on the ground that it is malformed. If we think about the meaning of the term master branch in Git, it was actually misnamed from the beginning because the master branch has no control over any other branches. It cannot enforce any changes in other branches, and it also has no special permissions compared to other branches, except for the protections that we give it. It's more a convention that this is the main branch. So what are other IT projects doing about this naming scheme? So again, a quote from this IETF draft. Aside from the arguably most important reason outlined above, these terms are becoming less used and therefore increasingly less compatible as more communities move away from their use. For example, a lot of IT projects and government agencies over the past years have decided to deprecate the use of the master-slave analogy in their documents and in their daily use. So the NIST, the National Institute for Standards and Technology, has deprecated the term. Large software projects like Python, Drupal, GitHub, and Django have all deprecated the usage of the term. And the largest online code hosting platforms like GitHub and GitLab already initialize all new software projects with a different default branch name, which is main. The Git project itself still uses master as the default if you install a Git version, but this is not because they don't want to change it. It's they have some technical issues with their test suite of a few 100,000 tests that use the name everywhere, and it's hard to change automatically. However, Git has functionality that allows you to change that locally on your computer. So you could change Git so that every new repository automatically gets a new default branch name. And for example, if you install Git on Windows using the Git for Windows package, you already get a suggestion during the installation to change the name to main during the installation. So in other words, since all major platforms change the default branch to name, at some point in the future, master will be the less used and deprecated term in every project. It might take years or decades, but it definitely will happen. So what has that to do with Aspect? At one of our regular bi-weekly user meetings that are open to everyone, if you want to, please feel free to attend. We have announcements in the forum whenever they happen. We decided after some discussion and considerations that we also want to rename Aspect's default branch from master to main. We performed a test run of this renaming, and Manfredus was so kind to perform this in the geodynamic world builder already. The test was successful, and so we decided to go ahead and do the same for Aspect. Unfortunately, this is not a change that we can only do on our side online. It will require a small effort for every user of Aspect, everyone who uses the Git repository, as opposed to only downloading a tarball for a release package. So we decided to do it during this user meeting to have everyone on board and ideally like distribute the knowledge about it as widely as possible so that no one is surprised by the change. What do we hope to achieve with this? So we are aware that this is just a name change. This will not automatically make this a more inclusive community. But why do we do it anyway? So first of all, there's no reason to keep around terminology that is not really useful. We don't need to stick to past mistakes, and we should try to continuously improve. Also, many of us are convinced that main is simply a better name because it has a meaning. It says it's the main branch that we agreed on. And we want to show that we are willing to make changes if there are things in our community that are not inclusive or can be perceived as not inclusive. All right, so what needs to be done? It's actually not that hard. There was actually a lot of talk just to preface a relatively small change. First of all, we will have to rename the main branch on the geodynamics aspect repository on GitHub. This will also automatically retarget all currently open pull requests to this new branch. This is something that I will do live next. Then we will have to rename the main branch of every user fork on GitHub. This is something that you will have to do with your fork of Aspect if you already have one. But that is easy to do because GitHub will show you a notification once I have changed the main branch. And you will just have to click somewhere on a button on that notification that will automatically take over the changes into your repository. And finally, all the local branches that you have in your Aspect repositories will need to be renamed from master to main. And this is something that you will have to do, but it's just a 4-line command. And I will show it to you and will also do it at the same time so you can follow along. Before we start with any of this, I wanted to take a quick break and ask if you have any questions, either about the reasoning, why we do this, or the process. Because this, once we have started it, there's essentially no turning back. Once we have renamed the main branch, we wouldn't like to go back to the old name. Feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand if you have a question. Okay, if there are no questions, that's fine too. And then I'll go ahead. So this is the first part that I will do online. So we will rename the main branch of GeoDynamics aspect. Just to show you how I got there, in case you need to do something like that at any point in your repository. If you go to a GitHub repository, there's a settings tab. And as long as you have the necessary permissions, you can switch to branches and then rename a branch. In this case, I will rename the master branch to main. And GitHub will automatically update all of the currently open pull requests to this new branch name. It will also update our branch protection rules for the main branch. So now when I go to the official GeoDynamics aspect repository, I got this pop-up window. And all of you should get the same. Let me quickly check something else before we continue with that pop-up window. If I go to my personal aspect repository on GitHub, I will get a different pop-up window that says the default branch on the parent repository has been renamed. GeoDynamics aspect renamed its default branch to main. And you get a link to your branch settings of your GitHub repository.
Rene, I don't have that. I'm not sure everybody else has it. What does everybody else see?
I can see there's one. Was that someone saying you see it?
Yes, I said I see it. Yeah.
Okay,
I
excellent.
saw it. But also, if you go on the branches, you can just edit it, even without seeing this pop-up.
Yes, so going to settings and branches, just like I did, and renaming that to main will also work. But Wolfgang, is it possible that you forked not from GeoDynamics aspect, but from a different?
No, actually, the reason is that I'm not signed in. This is the first time I'm in the office this year, and GitHub has signed me out.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's another possibility. Yeah. So if you're not signed in, you will also not see the pop-up.
Yeah.
So Rene, you suggest also doing the rename for our repos?
I would suggest to also rename for your repos. It is not. I don't think it's required, but I think just for consistency, it would be easier if everyone renamed their GitHub repository also to main. You can get there if you click on the branch settings link. You will see the default branch name, and you can rename it to main, just like I did.
And I can confirm that after logging in, it all works now.
Great. Once you have renamed the branch in your repository, you will see a new pop-up, exactly the same one that I got on the main, the GeoDynamics aspect repository. And the pop-up will likely say the default branch has been renamed. Master is now named main. And then it says, if you have a local clone, you can update it by running the following commands. And then here are the commands that you will have to do while being inside of your Aspect repository in a terminal.
Can you paste that into chat, since I must have missed it when it popped up on my computer? Thank you.
Yes, if you actually, so if it didn't pop up for you, or if you accidentally click it away, these are the commands. There is one wrinkle here, and that is if you manually renamed your remote to your repository something else than origin, then this origin and this origin needs to be replaced with the name of your remote. If you don't understand what I just said, ignore it and just use the instructions that are here.
And origin is the name of the upstream official geodynamics aspect repo, right?
No, it's your geodynamics repo. That depends on how you want to set this up. It depends on if you want to, by default, pull from your GitHub repository or from upstream if you just do git pull.
But this is the rename of the official branch. So if I rename origin main, then origin needs to be the upstream repository name or not. It doesn't make any sense that it would be mine.
That depends on if you have cloned your repository from Geodynamics Aspect or from your username / aspect, I would say. So for example, you could set this up in two ways, right? You could either clone your repository from Geodynamics Aspect and then add a remote for your personal GitHub, or you could first fork on GitHub and then clone your local Aspect repository from your username / aspect, and then add upstream as a separate remote. Does that make sense, Timo?
I understand that I can originally clone from one or the other. My opinion is that doesn't matter. It matters what name you give the remote. And I'm confused that this is origin here. I mean, you're saying that this is the own clone, but I disagree. But I don't know, whatever. We'll see how it works.
Okay, we have feedback from Lorraine and John that it worked for them.
So
work is just all relative to when I do the next pull request.
Of course,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. We'll see if anything breaks in a minute.
Nothing complained past that. My typing did not elicit an error message.
So in my case, I named origin, I named something else. So then if you did that as well, you need to replace origin with something else you renamed.
Yes, but if you manually renamed a remote in your repository, you know what a remote is and you know which words to change in this command.
And we have to do this twice, right, for both remotes?
No. Your local branch has one default upstream branch. Don't get hung up on the word upstream. It could be either your GitHub repository or the main Geodynamics Aspect repository. And so maybe I have this written down in the presentation, what the individual commands are. We can go through the commands individually to discuss this. So the first line renames your local branch from master to main. Second line will download all the new branch information that happened online. So this way, your local repository knows that the online one was changed. This branch will tell your local branch main that its online equivalent it's connected to is now called origin main. And this one sets the head pointer to the new branch, which is not really related to anything online. So the crucial line would be this one. Which branch is the default online version of the branch that you are changing locally? And you can choose which remote to connect to by using a different remote name here.
I have a question, Rene.
Yep.
And this was like at the 2015 hackathon, and I think Timo gave a, here's our Git setup. And upstream was geodynamics aspect, and origin was my personal repository on Git.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I'm a little confused about if I do git branch -u origin main, am I doing that to my own local, well, my own GitHub, telling it that origin is still but the name of the branch has changed? Or I'm confused because you have upstream on the right and origin on the left. And upstream to me is geodynamics aspect, and origin.
Yes, yes. Yeah, there's an unfortunate duplication of names here. Is this better? Upstream in this case does not mean the remote that is named upstream for you. It means a branch has, say, a link to an online version of it. It knows which of the remote branches is connected to this one. And this line tells it that its online version, even if you renamed it from master to main locally, it will still be linked to origin/master, for example, as its online version. And you need to tell it that the online version is now also called origin main.
Rene, I have a question as well.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
so then I said, yeah. And so then when I updated locally, and so when I did just like remote update, everything looks proper. And so I can see it like upstream main now, but still both, but there is still upstream master. And so there is still the master branch. Are those, I mean, should we delete those at some point? Or I mean, should we delete, and or locally on my computer, there's also still an origin master. And so
yes.
Should we delete those at some point?
You can, it's completely safe to just ignore them from now on. They are like broke, so they actually still exist on your computer. Your computer still has all of the information of that branch. There is a command to remove them. I saw that while looking through the instructions of this, but I didn't want to put it on the slides because I thought it would confuse people more. I think it is something like git branch prune, but I wouldn't want to ask everyone to do this right now because I would want to actually look up the command. But for now, I would say just ignore it. It's no harm keeping the old name around in your local repository. And whenever you clone a new repository, that wouldn't have this anymore.
Interestingly, I still see upstream master though. And yep. Okay, so but then that one, it will stick around though.
That is the same things I said about your local master also, or your origin master also applies to upstream master. It's okay. Just think of it as a local copy of the online version of that branch that you still have around.
Great. Thanks, Rene.
All right. If you have any problems with this, then please, now is the time to put it into the chat window. But so far, or unmute yourself and tell us about it. Unfortunately, I can't do it myself right now, which I just realized while giving this presentation, because I'm not in my Ubuntu operating system at the moment. Well, that seems like it was a lot less pain than we were afraid of. It is possible that over the next weeks, we will find some small things that still need to be fixed. So we are reasonably certain that our continuous integration testers will just continue to work, but that's something that we'll have to test. We will have to see if there are any broken links in our documentation towards the master branch name. But we did a search for that beforehand, and it seemed very minor and just in very few places. But if there is no other concern or problems, then this was much easier than we thought, and also much quicker than we thought, which means we are nearly half an hour ahead of schedule already. The next thing we had planned after this keynote was to have half an hour break and to continue at the hour, in an hour. I would prefer to do that in order to keep to the schedule instead of moving up all of the presentations, if that is all right with everyone. That would mean we have quite a break right now of 1 hour. Maybe it's lunchtime if you're at the East Coast, maybe you have some time for breakfast. It also means we would have some time for individual discussions if you have any questions, and I'm happy to stick around with everyone who may just want to discuss some questions or models. We will have more time for that later, but I will actually not be around later. So that may be the best approach. Is that something that sounds reasonable to everyone in order to stick to the schedule? Okay, I see some heads nodding. Then I would say, for now, we just say we take a break of an hour to continue with your normal life. And then in an hour, we'll continue with some short presentations on aspect projects, and we'll have a discussion session afterwards. Then thank you very much, and see you in an hour.